insider, Major League Baseball, Yahoo Sports. Jeff Passan joining us this morning on the program, covering the World Series. Jeff, good morning.
Did I just hear the end of Chad Kelly getting cut?
That's right. Chad Kelly has been released this morning.
No! Okay, what's worse? Losing your cush job as a backup quarterback in the NFL or getting beaten with a vacuum?
I mean, they both got a sting. I got to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, one of them's like emotionally painful, and the other is you lose your job. So I honestly don't know which of those is worse.
And I wonder,
is Von Miller paying reparations to Chad Kelly for getting him too drunk at his Halloween party now?
No. Von Miller's like, get this guy out of here. If he can't hold his liquor, I don't want him around this locker room.
That's right. Our quarterback needs to be a leader, not the guy walking into apartments and sitting on couches and mumbling incoherently.
That's exactly right. Absolutely correct. So last night, Game 1 of the World Series, another moment for Clayton Kershaw that goes up like a poof of dust in October. How do you square how great he has been in the regular season versus what his October record is?
I have trouble doing so, but I also recognize that when you're in the playoffs, you are facing better lineups. You are facing more patient teams and teams that, as a general rule, can do more damage to the baseball. And yet Clayton Kershaw is a guy who during the regular season has had no problems with that. And during the postseason, let's not forget, his start before this, he was absolutely dominant. And so the thing I have trouble squaring is more the inconsistency from a guy whose whole career has been the paramount of consistent. Clayton Kershaw's regular season ERA is the lowest, I believe, of all time among starting pitchers since the dead ball era. I mean, he is a no doubt Hall of Famer already at 30 years old, and yet he just hasn't been able to consistently go out there in the playoffs and put up the zeros that he does. And I wish I had an explanation. I honestly do not know, and I don't believe that he knows either.
You wrote a really interesting piece about last night's game number 1 and the criticisms you hear of Dave Roberts going to Alex Wood last night with 2 away in the inning and a 1-run lead, and Wood promptly serves up the 3-run home run that basically ices it for the Red Sox, over managing. And you're at an interesting place with this as well because you can understand the criticisms, but it's the reality. Where are we when you hear over managing being a critique of a guy like Roberts last night?
I don't think the word over managing exists anymore. I think that's just managing right now. And, the story was sort of me trying to pull up to a 30,000-foot view of the sport and where it is right now. Because as I was writing it, I was trying to envision the person who got stuck down in the bomb shelter accidentally 15 years ago and came up and watched a baseball game for the first time last night. And 15 years, it's not a particularly long time. But let's remember, in 2003, Moneyball came out. And the evolution of baseball since then, and I made this argument in the column, it's the greatest change in baseball since integration. If you can think of all the ways that the sport is different right now, and what I called it, and I stole this from my colleague Mike Oz, who I think brilliantly described it, is self-aware baseball. Baseball people have been obsessing over the tiniest details of information for the last few years now in order to get the most minuscule of marginal advantages. And what that's done, I think, is made the game much more sterile and honestly much less enjoyable in many regards. I still love baseball. I still enjoy a well-played baseball game as much as any other sport out there. And yet I understand that if the random average fan is watching a 4-hour World Series game in which they don't have any stakes, they're seeing 24 strikeouts, they're seeing 12 pitchers, they're seeing 24 position players, they're seeing stops throughout the game, they're seeing an average of upward 30 seconds between pitches, they're seeing fewer balls in play than have ever been before, they're seeing more strikeouts than there were hits, which was the case in the 2018 season. Is that a game that's going to entice new fans? I don't think the answer is yes. And I think that as 3 million fewer fans came to baseball games this year, that's an issue with which Rob Manfred and the rest of the people at 245 Park Avenue are grappling right now, because they recognize that they had, and they may still have, a chance to feed on the questions about football's long-term viability because of concussions and because of all the other issues that plague that sport. And I don't know that they're grabbing that opportunity the way that they can, because the day-to-day game that they have just is not something that's intriguing to kids right now.
Jeff Passan, MLB columnist, Yahoo Sports in Boston, covering game number 1 and game number 2 of the World Series. And this is where I find your perspective really fascinating because, as you said, you love baseball. You cover baseball on a daily basis. You oftentimes write about how much you love about baseball and what you love, but you also are honest with being aggravated about some of the stuff that it's stuck in the past on and wondering about long-term viability. But in your estimation, is there any way to put the genie back into the bottle when it comes to all of these things that you mentioned as problems?
Well, that's a very good and important question, and I think a pitch clock is going to help. I see that happening, if not next year, then very soon. Because when I was talking about upward of 30 seconds during the regular season this year, the average time between pitches was clocked at 24.1 seconds. Let's hypothetically say you put a 20-second pitch clock out there. This year, the average number of pitches in a game, there were 3.9 pitches per plate appearance, and I believe there were 78 plate appearances per game. If you were to take those 24 seconds and chop them down to 20, based on those averages, it would shave 19 minutes and 48 seconds off of an average game. It would go from the 3 hours, 4 minutes regular season that it's at right now to 2 hours and 45 minutes, which would be the shortest game time since 1985. Now, that to me is one step where you can get the game moving faster. The other question, the one that I don't have a great answer to, honestly, is getting the ball back in play and incentivizing hitters to swing earlier in the count and pitchers to put the ball out there. You have better fielders now than you've ever had before, but as a function of that, you have hitters who are trying to maximize every plate appearance that they have. Thus, it's more of an all-or-nothing approach. You end up having more strikeouts. Defensive shifts have almost killed the single. You have thousands fewer singles than you had in the years past, and the home run rate, not compared to last year, but to years past, has really spiked. So how do you incentivize hitters to put the ball in play early in counts so you don't have an average of almost 4 minutes between balls being put in play like there is right now? There are radical ideas out there, ones that I don't think baseball, frankly, is going to cotton to. But at this point, you really have to consider just about everything because baseball's not at a crisis point right now, but it's getting there.
About 30 seconds left. Let me just ask you about this series. Did the Dodgers blow their chance at winning this series by blowing last night?
You know what? After picking the Astros to run away with the World Series after Game 1 of the ALCS, I'm done with idiotic first-game proclamations. Let's put it this way, though. The Red Sox have won 116 games this season for a reason. They are, my friend Tim Brown wrote about this today, they are capable of seeing what the other team wants to do and just being malleable and weathering it and eventually imposing themselves on the other team. going to be hard for the Dodgers to win the series, but not impossible.
Read Jeff Passan's column on last night's game number 1, how the World Series opener personified self-aware baseball, the hyper-obsessive game today. Really interesting look at where baseball is and how last night represented that. That's available at yahoosports.com. Also, follow Jeff on Twitter. He has it pinned to the top of his, or at the top of his Twitter headlines and Twitter timeline. That's at Jeff Passan for Yahoo Sports. It's always good to catch up, brother. Thanks so much, man. We'll keep reading. We'll keep listening.
Pleasure is always mine, my friend. Take it easy.
Okay, Jeff Passan joining us this morning here on the show.